Have you ever been on the back of a moped on an island somewhere in the Indonesian archipelago, watching an incredible world pass by? Vibrant greens and other colors, unfamiliar sounds mixed with the wind whipping past your ears and the rumble of the motor as it bustles away beneath you. And then you zone out. You still see, you still hear, you still feel, you still smell. But your mind is no longer simultaneous with your body. It's as if your conscience has vacated the premises, and these things that you're seeing and hearing and feeling, they're happening to someone else. And then the moped stops. You pop back into the present, maybe a little confused as to how you got there and where the time went, and you remember that you came to buy Band-Aids because you were too chicken to try cauterizing the cut on your hand with a hot kitchen knife. Okay, maybe you haven't had this exact experience, but if you've ever been in a car for a long ride, there's a good chance you've had something similar. This kind of zoning out in a car is very common, so much so that it seems to be the go-to for experts trying to make certain strange phenomena seem more relatable, especially two phenomena in particular, trance and hypnosis. Maybe you're asking, what's the difference? Well, it's hard to know for sure. We're entering the inner realm of the human experience, the place where the only one who knows what's happening is the person experiencing it inside their own head. And sometimes, a lot of the times, even they don't remember what happens. Here's the basic principle of what's going down in hypnosis. Until humans are 8 or 9 years old, we live entirely subconsciously, which basically means that we're highly suggestible, that we take what we're given, and we react to things without really thinking about them or analyzing them. That thinking, analytical part of the brain is called a lot of things. The rational filter, the monkey mind, whatever you want to call it, it develops late in adolescence, and we carry it with us for the rest of our lives. It filters stimuli through analytical thought processes before we react to them. That's why we tell kids not to talk to strangers, even though adults do it all the time, because the kids can't evaluate the situation effectively and are consequentially very suggestible, making it a generally bad idea for them to talk to strangers. A hypnotist described the goal of hypnotism like this. You overstress the rational mind filter with stimuli so that any new inputs go directly to the subconscious, highly suggestible part of the mind. That subconscious mind, it's still there, even in adults, under the surface. When a hypnotist gets somebody into this state, they can tell them anything like, "You hate smoking," or "When I snap my fingers, your feet will be stuck to the ground. You'll watch the rest of this video, and then you'll hit the like button and subscribe." It's a good thing I'm not a hypnotist, otherwise I'd be really popular. Now, bringing it all back, this is apparently the process that goes on when you zone out in a car, or on the back of a moped. There's no getting your feet stuck to the ground because there's not someone else controlling your experience. Instead, you enter this subconscious state on your own. You see things and feel things, but you don't remember a lot of it because your brain isn't cataloging your experiences like it would under normal circumstances when it's going over every inch of every stimulus like a soccer dad getting the grass stains out of a white jersey. And according to Judith Becker, author of the book Deep Listeners, Music, Emotion, and Trancing, the process behind music-induced trance is analogous to the car zone-out effect. We can therefore extrapolate that the process behind music-induced trance is also very similar to the process behind hypnosis that we just explained. Like I said, though, this is some meta-level, inner-experiential stuff that we're dealing with. There will likely never be definitive proof that music-induced trance functions in the same way as hypnosis. And it will take mountains of research to even get to the point where the hypothesis is even just slightly convincing to expert academicians. But you've got to start somewhere. So I'm starting in Indonesia, the first place outside of the US that I ever went, and the place that I'm going to keep going back to for as long as I can. So thank you for joining me on today's journey. where music will take us deep into the human experience to a place where spirits, demons, and magic are the very threads that make up the fabric of reality. Action. The first tradition that we're going to check out today goes by many names. Kuda Lumping, Kuda Kepang, Jatilan, Jaran Kepang, and Ebeg. One of the reasons it has so many names is because variants of the tradition exist in so many places. Countries where you can find it being practiced include Singapore and Malaysia, and within Indonesia I've read, heard, or seen about it taking place throughout Java as well as on Sumatra. We'll go ahead and call it Kuda Lumping for the remainder of this video because that's a name frequently used for it in Indonesia, our country of focus today. In colloquial English, you can call it the hobby horse dance. Every performance and regional variant has its differences, but typically the idea is that dancers will dress as horses and be guided into and out of trance. Spirits will be called upon during the trance and may possess the dancers, and these can be spirits of ancestors or of animals. Outward signs of possession can include twitching and convulsing, as well as moving around like horses, gulping down huge buckets of water, and eating unhusked rice. Eventually, some entranced dancers having particularly strong experiences may eat light bulbs, lie on thorn sticks, and swallow flames. Dancers interviewed by a researcher named Kathy Foley reported this: "You feel good and you awake refreshed." They said that all of the power comes from the Pawang, who calls the spirits into their bodies and ensures that they will emerge from the experience unharmed. Now, the Pawang goes by many names as well. This is the leader of the troupe, in some ways the band's tour manager, in other ways the spiritual guide, and in other ways still, the puppet master. In some traditions, they manipulate a spiritual energy called Belo. One of these group leaders interviewed by Kathy Foley said that the use of a jimat, a magically charged object, facilitates the entrancement of the performers, as do the mantras he utters under his breath. Occasionally, a pawang will also carry incense as well as whips with which they may strike the participants. In addition to the cracking of the whip, sounds you may hear at a Kuda Lumping performance include traditional Javanese instruments like gongs, sarong, suling, and kendang, and more common are European-American instruments like the electric guitar. Palmer King, the man behind the ethnomusicological web archive Aro Archipelago, says the music is meant to be loud and intense, characterized by hypnotic rhythms. He said that after a performance, he left the event just as he'd left rock concerts, ears buzzing, heart pumping, sweat dripping down his back. Now, I want to talk more about this troop leader, sometimes called pawang, other times called penimbu, and still other times called dalang. Let's focus in on that last title, because it draws a striking parallel with another beautiful and fascinating Indonesian tradition, Wayang kulit. Wayang kulit is a form of shadow puppet theater practiced in similar but distinct forms on Java and Bali. The puppets, often shaped from deer leather, take the form of characters from Hindu epics, such as the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Wayang kulit dates back at least to the time of the Majapahit, a Hindu empire of the sea based on Java that lasted from the late 13th to the early 16th century AD. The Majapahit formed in response to an invasion of Java by the Chinese Yuan dynasty, ruled by the descendants of Chinggis Khan, and the Majapahit was responsible for further spreading throughout Indonesia the influence of Hinduism, which had initially arrived in the archipelago in the 1st century AD. The Majapahit also produced a couple of history's great dynamic duos. Diagitarja, daughter of the founder of Majapahit, reigned in the first half of the 14th century AD, and with her chancellor Gajah Mada, whose name translates to something like elephant general and who lived up to that name both in wisdom and toughness, Diagitarja expanded Majapahit's dominion over much of modern-day Indonesia. Diagitarja was succeeded by her son, Hayam Wuruk, who was also supported by Gajah Mada and was responsible for ingraining the Hindu epics along with Wayang kulit and other theater forms in the cultural conscious of Indonesian society. The Majapahit ultimately fell to the emerging Islamic Sultanate of Demak, setting the stage for Indonesia to become, in modern times, the world's largest Muslim country. However, thanks to legendary figures like those I just mentioned, traditions, rituals, and ideas from Hinduism, Buddhism, and indigenous animistic belief systems still play a prominent role in Indonesian culture today. A performance of Wayang kulit is an incredibly complicated operation to pull off. There's the audience sitting and watching the shadows cast on a fabric screen act out a story that can last from sunset to sunrise. There's the gamelan, or orchestra, apparently improvising in perfect unity as the puppet master cues them to play, or stop, and get louder or quieter. No performance is identical to any other, so the orchestra cannot simply play the same thing every time. Lastly, of course, there's the puppet master. He brings the puppets to life by giving them voices and moving them in ways characteristic to their identity. Each puppet character has a distinct personality that remains relatively constant from one performance to the next. The puppet master also cues the gamelan and creates some sound effects of their own, especially for battle scenes. And the name for this leader of a Wayang kulit? Dalang. It's the term for puppet master, and it's also used to identify the leader of a Kuda Lumping group. Some dalangs bring the spirits of legendary characters to life inside of shadow puppets, while other dalangs bring the spirits of ancestors or of animals to life inside of human dancers. Then both dalangs manipulate those spirits or keep them in check, and then release them at the conclusion of a performance.
Terus pinunjul marang sak pepadane wekasan tansah tinuding dening panguwasaning dat kamurwing dat. Kuwi kabeh ora. Nanging sejatine Gusti nyawang titah mau kabeh padha ana ngersane Hyang Mahanasa. Mula nadyan Petruk namung derajate kaceplik, Petruk kuwi mung kono kawan, Petruk kuwi mung batur saumpamane. Nanging uga piniji marang panguwasaning Gusti dadi lantaran tumedhaking wahyu. Yo. Mula saktenane kabeh wong urip ana ngalam padang mau, ora ana ingkang mendusul, ora ana ingkang ngendelong, kabeh rata ana ngersaning dat kamurwing dat Kresna kakangku ya. Purnaning gati sura sudrajane kang recuh brasta kaping 12 Darmastuti. Rahayu ing samya pinanggih, rahayu ing samya makarya. Kula nyuwun pangapunten nek enten lepate. Suminten tiban cendela cekap semanten crita kula dalu punika Ndara.
Kathy Foley described in detail the way in which trance dancers are what she referred to as empty vessels. Puppet, mask, and trancer are alike in that each is an empty vessel waiting for the vital energy of the other to fill it. In trance performance, the desirability of the performer as an empty vessel is clear. The individual ego blocks the communication from the spirit world. So then, how does the Dalang convert the dancer to the danced? How do they empty the body of the ego, leaving it as a vessel ready to be filled by an external spirit? Again, according to Foley, continuous repetitive music is characteristic of much of ritual trance music, particularly where she was studying in Java. Remember that Aral Archipelago's Palmer Keane reported loud and intense music with hypnotic rhythms. Instruments used to play trance music include those mentioned earlier that are associated with Kuda Lumping, gongs, sarong, suling, kendang, and electric guitar, and others like cymbals, oboes, wooden clappers, metal plates, bamboo stamping tubes, and rattles. The instruments frequently combine to create a cacophony in which one can easily imagine losing oneself. The Indonesian word rame can refer to a crowd or to the making of a huge hubbub of noise in order to invite the spirits into a place. However, when it comes to trance, louder isn't always better. Folkways Records released their Music of Indonesia in 1950, and the album included a song from the Batak people called Ile-Ile. The liner notes report that this kind of music is often used to accompany the dance of a medicine man. The Batak do not like loud voices and even subdue the tone of their gongs. For more insight as to the nuances of volume, we can look to a mortar and pestle tradition called Main Alu. There, loud music is certainly effective for inducing trance, but the maximum volume is reserved for occasions when the community is trying to scare away evil spirits that are wreaking havoc. This tradition developed from a practice of communally dehusking rice in a large mortar. Groups of several people would surround the mortar, each person holding a pestle, and sequentially pound the rice in an interlocking rhythmic pattern. It gradually developed into what we're going to take the liberty of calling a musical tradition, where the mortar is bereft of rice and the pestles are aimed towards particular sections of the mortar trough to produce a variety of wooden tones, which, combined with the interlocking rhythmic pattern, create a sort of melody that is repeated over and over. Now, in Main Alu, you can't just use any old hunk of wood to make the mortar or the pestles. There's a spiritually significant process of constructing the instrument that has probably been practiced even since when the mortar was just used for processing grain. The lead builder and an assistant will search for a suitable jackfruit tree. Then they will seek permission from the spirits to cut the tree down. They will also seek protection from the spirits, as well as from Allah and Muhammad and Islamicized traditions, for themselves, for the mortar and pestle, and for the community at large. Then, before performance, spirit offerings will be placed and incense scattered. There is no distinction between performer and audience, as any member of the community can step in and take over a pestle if they're feeling it. A member of one community that maintains the Mainalu tradition, in an interview with ethnomusicologist Margaret Kartomi, said that in his youth, the magical sound of the music in the charged social atmosphere of pestle and mortar parties held at full moon induced some participants to enter a state of altered consciousness, in which the pestles seemed to move of their own accord. Anyone who wished could take up a pestle and join in the playing, and after being possessed by a spirit, could make a request for rain to fall in a case of a drought, or for help to attract a spouse, and so forth. Some trance traditions involve no music at all. Jane Belo wrote in the 1960s about trance in Bali. She recounted one occasion when a diviner, known as a Balian, was called upon to help cure a sick man. The Balian arrived with his assistant, a young boy. The Balian made offerings in the room where the sick man lay in bed, lit a brazier, smoked incense over it, chanted a prayer, and heated oil over the brazier. He then drew words in the pan with oil while continuing to chant. Next, he dipped the boy's thumb in the oil and chanted as the boy stared at the thumbnail. Then, the diviner began to ask the boy questions about where in the sick man's body his problems were originating. The appearance of the child was one of great concentration, but he seemed very far off, said Belo. The child suddenly began to talk very freely, though with some difficulty, as though he were tired, or as though what he saw was difficult to describe. The child, exhausted, then passed out, and the Balian kept chanting while the boy recovered. The boy was shortly brought back to his senses by being given water and being smoked with incense. On this particular occasion, the boy revealed that a pasangan, a cursed magical object, had been causing the sick man's ailment. It was made in the form of a body, with insects placed at well-chosen spots and excrement well smudged all over. It was supposed to have been placed in the ill man's house shrine and then buried in his yard. The Balian prescribed the man some herbal remedies, the pasangan was found near his home and disposed of, and the man soon recovered. Throughout this episode, I've been referring to all of the altered state experiences in these traditions simply as trance. But it's important to note that that's not necessarily how they're understood by the people who participate in the traditions themselves. In her book, Deep Listeners, Music, Emotion, and Trancing, Judith Becker spent some time discussing the nuances of altered state experiences in Bali. She defines several concepts that help us understand just how diverse these experiences can be. Nadi means to become. It's a general term that can be used for most any type of trance. Kasurupan is to be entered, a general term for possession trance. Bebuten is possession within a ritual context by a low-ranked demonic spirit. Kakalan is to be possessed outside of a ritual context by a low-ranked demonic spirit. Dasaran is to become a medium, fully conscious but not in control of one's words or behavior. Kalingihan is to become the sitting place of a highly ranked deity such as a holy ancestor. And Kataksan is to be entered by a spirit that gives one special powers. On the topic of those special powers, a Balinese spirit medium, who is also a trained Western medical doctor interviewed by Becker, said that when in trance, we become clever beyond our abilities. We more quickly understand other people. It is a kind of teaching. It is a teaching from God that anyone can receive. Ceremonies are a kind of transformation from God to mankind. But not every transformation from God is a benevolent one. Babuten, which earlier referred to possession within a ritual context by a low-ranked spirit, is also a name for a Balinese ritual invoked to restore balance in the event of misfortune, like crop failure or pestilence or illness. Performers in a Babuten ritual enact the conflict between good, represented by Barong, the king of the spirits, and evil, represented by Rangda, the leader of an army of powerful witches. The ritual is accompanied by a gamelan, which plays throughout, creating an aura of differing reality, a sound-mediated reality that renders plausible the appearance of deities and demons in the realm of humans. As the story goes, followers of Barong become entranced and become enraged by Rangda. They feel an overwhelming urge to attack and stab her with their ceremonial daggers, called keris. However, when they approach, her power tricks them into turning the daggers against themselves. Barong's followers begin to stab themselves with as much force as they can, but the power of Barong saves them from any serious harm. The skin is often left entirely unbroken. The ritual of Babuten epitomizes an idea that is key to understanding trance in Bali specifically, as well as in Indonesia in general. Spiritual energy is neither good nor bad. A clear line cannot be drawn between reality and spirituality. The characters of Wayang kulit are puppets, but they're also vessels that can contain and project spiritual energy. just as dancers in Kuda are individuals while simultaneously serving as repositories for the spirits of creatures or of ancestors or of deities. At the beginning of this video, I proposed that trancing may take place through the same process as hypnosis, with dalangs and troop leaders who manipulate dancers and puppets as a hypnotist would a client, and with multi-sensory stimulation from the colorful sights and sounds and smells of ritual. It certainly seems like this connection could be possible. But traditional trance in Indonesia is so much more than just a process in the brain. It's a reenacting of history and a divining of life's mysteries. It's a preservation of heritage. It's entertainment. It's a restoration of balance to the universe. There's so much more we can learn about ourselves by studying these traditions, but perhaps the most important lessons are within the stories, the dances, the characters, and the spirits themselves. I'll allow Linda Hunt to close us out for today with her incredible scene from the 1982 film, The Year of Living Dangerously. But before we show that, I want to finish off my bit by saying thank you so much for watching. And remember, music changes minds, emotionally and physically. Music fills spaces between people and within them. But above all else, music moves. Good night, everybody.
You like my puppets? If you want to understand Java, you have to understand the Wayang, the sacred shadows there. The puppet master is a priest. That's why they call Sukarno the great puppet master, balancing the left with the right. Their shadows are souls, and the screen is heaven. You must watch their shadows, not the puppets. The right, in constant struggle with the left. The forces of light and darkness in endless balance. In the West, we want answers for everything. Everything is right or wrong, or good or bad. But in the Wayang, no such final conclusions exist. Look at Prince Arjuna. He's a hero. But he can also be fickle and selfish. Krishna says to him, all is clouded by desire, Arjuna, as a fire by smoke, as a mirror by dust. Through these, it blinds the soul.
Pretty good stuff.
This is the Princess Srikandi, noble and proud, but headstrong. Arjuna will fall in love with her.
And there's this one.
He's very special. The dwarf, Samar.
What does he do?
He serves the prince.